Okay, so welcome to another video. This is more for my own sake than anyone else's, so 19.2. Okay, let's just head straight into it. No BS. African American Great Migration. Let's talk about that. After the Civil War, many African Americans left the South to escape racism, and violence, and this movement is called the Great Migration. And it happened mostly between the Civil War and the Great Depression. And most African Americans moved to cities in the Northeast and the Midwest. Like main cities like New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, St. Louis, whatever, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Indianapolis. And these 8 cities got over 2/3 of the total migrants. And there were some push factors that, like things that forced them to leave the South, basically, which is racial hatred and discrimination even after slavery ended, and also violence from groups like the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, a white supremacist group. I hope you know that. And also lynchings, which is illegal killings, often by hanging, targeting African Americans. There were 3,500 of these reported in the South from 1865 through 1900. There are also some pull factors that attracted them to northern and midwestern cities, like job opportunities where they can earn money, and chances to vote safely for men, not for women, more available housing, and higher wages than in the South. So, jobs African Americans did in cities, like for men, they mostly did unskilled or semi-skilled work, like steel mines, construction, meat packing, whatever that means. Sorry, someone came in my room. Just whatever. And railroads as porters or servants. And women usually worked in the garment industry, like laundries or domestic work, like maids or cooks. And often men moved first, then brought their families later, and many factory workers helped migrants move because they needed cheap labor. So moving north didn't really mean everything was easy. I mean, wages were better, but the cost of living, rent, food, and essentials was like way higher. African Americans often lived in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions similar to European immigrants in tenement slums. And racial discrimination, like, still existed in the North. And European immigrants sometimes resented African Americans because they competed for jobs or worked for lower wages. And landlords and bankers also discriminated. Homeowners like made agreements not to sell homes to African Americans, like covenants. And banks practiced redlining, which is refusing loans to people in certain neighborhoods, often black areas. And as a result, African Americans ended up concentrated in the worst slums, and these problems lasted well into the 20th century. The non-economic benefits of moving to the north, though, were better education, schools were more funded, and attendance laws were stricter. greater personal freedom. In crowded cities, African Americans could move and work more freely without constant threats from white people. And these social and psychological benefits often outweighed the economic challenge. In the late 1800s, new immigrants mostly came from Southern and Eastern Europe, like Italy, Greece, Russia, and other Slavic countries. Older waves from Northern and Western Europe, like Germany, Britain, and Nordic countries, were often wealthier and moved west. New immigrants were poorer and less educated, so they stayed in cities near ports rather than moving west. And by 1890, over 80% of New York's population were either foreign-born or children of foreign-born parents. And why these European immigrants came was the push factor was famine, religious or political persecution, and avoiding their military service. And the pull was promised steady jobs with wages. And Ellis Island. Ellis Island opened in 1892 in New York City as a main port for European immigrants. The Bureau of Immigration helped process millions of newcomers. Doctors or nurses checked for infectious diseases. About 2% were denied entry due to health problems or criminal history. Also, challenges for immigrants where they couldn't speak English, most of them at least, and they relied on finding others who spoke their language to survive in the city. Okay. Immigrants often wanted comfort, and a common language, obviously. They moved close to relatives, friends, or people from the same hometown, creating ethnic enclaves or whatever, which are neighborhoods where people from the same country or culture live together. Examples: Little Italy and Chinatown. These neighborhoods had newspaper, food stores, and traditions from their home countries. Enclaves gave immigrants a sense of community, but also contributed to urban congestion, which is crowded, busy, and packed cities, especially in the poorest areas. And let's talk about discrimination against new immigrants. The Dillingham Commission of 1907 studied immigration and reported that new immigrants were different from earlier ones. They had darker skin, spoke unfamiliar languages, they practiced religion like Judaism and Catholicism, and they ate different foods. These visible differences made immigrants easy targets for hatred and discrimination. And immigrants were often blamed for problems like overcrowding, lack of jobs, or poor living conditions, similar to African Americans. Some Americans resented the new immigrants. Reverend Josiah Strong wrote Our Country in 1885, saying that immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe threatened the moral fiber, just like the values of America. And thousands of Americans joined the American Protective Association, which is a political group aiming to restrict immigration. They successfully pushed for literary tests for immigrants, which was passed in 1917. The Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned Chinese immigrants, and later laws like the Emergency Quota Act in 1921, the Immigration Act in 1924, and the National Origins Act. So let's talk Emergency Quota Act, Immigration Act, and National Origins Act. So yeah, these immigrants are just getting hated on. That's basically the moral of the story. Anyways, thank you. That's all for this one. Bye-bye.